Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our second hour today, we have the Zoom team has returned. Andy Carluccio, Jonathan Kokajko, Jonathan Kokotajlo and Sam Kokajko are joining us for the second hour. They're going to be talking about some new stuff that they're working on at Zoom, and then they will also be answering your questions about Zoom, ZoomISO, ZoomOSC, all the things that we do a lot with. So that we're really excited to have them in the second hour. So stay tuned for that. And now we're going to go ahead and jump into the questions. Bill, what do we have?
Actually, it's Mitch, but that's okay,
Mitch,
Leo.
sorry.
We got it straight.
So I'll first even here's the thing before for those listening. Mitch even told me right before that he was going to do the reading, and I still got it wrong. So you can tell when I'm on automatic pilot. And so anyway, next question.
It's production, Alex. No problem.
Exactly.
First question in from Jacob Goodnight in Indianapolis, Indiana. What are your go-to resources for high quality yet subtle super source backgrounds? All the ones I find are too busy and take attention away from the presenters.
Go ahead, John.
Well, you can always make your own in After Effects, but the site that I use is Envato, and there goes the rest of your day.
Go ahead, Jason.
I would try to source something that is directly under your control. I would go to Fiverr or just jump into Motion and just see what you can create. It really doesn't take very much to make something compelling.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, if you want a lot of control, do what John suggested. Go to Envato or somebody like that, or Pond5 or whoever, and get a template, because then you can adjust all the parameters. And you want slow, easy, nice looping backgrounds. You don't want busy stuff, like you say. And you're going to find that. And if you do find a template you like, you can adjust the parameters on it.
Yeah, I will say that I really like Motion for this specific operation, because it does a lot of things where you just have replicators and you can just have it just kind of move through something. So it can just do stuff, and you can set all of their actions to loop at a certain time. So you can set them all to I want all this stuff happening, but I want this to loop at 2 seconds and this loop at 6 seconds, and they'll all interact with each other. And they'll all build a perfect loop that you can just sit there and play, so there won't be any hitches. So that's one of the things to kind of look at. There's a company called Motion VFX that builds templates for Motion specifically. What's really cool about it is that Motion VFX, it's a template. It's not a video, and you can tear the whole thing apart. You can add things, take things away, and really build some great super sources. Next question.
From Graham Cardwell in Belfast, Northern Ireland, I recently resuscitated an old iPad mini, model A1432, and while it seems to hold its charge well and browse, albeit at a modest rate, on Safari, nothing on the App Store seems compatible. Is it just too old? Any suggested uses and apps for it?
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, it's pretty much just too old. I mean, the latest version of iOS is going to be 9.3.6, I think, and that will not run any of the current security protocols. So good luck with that.
Grant?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. It's 10 years old, that iPad, so yeah, it's doing well to still be going. It's impressive, actually, just battery alone, that 10 years later the battery's still going well. But you can use something I would use it for is something like stagetimer.io. It's just a web-based timer, and I think that could work okay. And it's perfect for just sticking in a corner and having the timer work. I was going to suggest the controller for Zoom Rooms, but you do need 10 for that. iOS 10. It's just you're just out of the reach on that one.
You're Jeffrey.
You could jailbreak it, and you could sideload previous versions of the apps, because there is a whole area in that in the jailbreak area that allows you to bring up previous versions. The biggest problem was that whole 32 to 64-bit jump, and
security. That's the other biggest problem.
In security, absolutely. So, otherwise, a lot of web-based stuff is still available that you can use as well. So it could be great for a reader. It could be great for anything that's web-based.
Go ahead, Bill.
As just a generic great little display, and I have one of the old ones too. I use this often for a little keynote graphic sign. If I want to put some kind of digital signage in a scene, put it over there. You can also put whole full screen graphics and use it as a little light on a miniature or something like that. I've often used this as a little kicker if I'm trying to get a shot of a little figurine or something like that. So there are actually a few things. I don't think they're good net things because, as you say, the operating system can't be updated past a certain old list, and that's an old Mini too. But there are still uses for them.
Next question.
Graham Cardwell is back for a one-off hybrid training session that has 3 in the room and 1 remote. How can I capture the trainer's screen for the remote attendee, given it will already be shared to the projector in the room, PC environment?
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, so I would suggest that you're running that presenter's computer in extended mode, and so then when they're running their presentation, you've got the presentation going to the projector, that you screen share into Zoom. So you have that computer join the meeting as well, have that screen share that second display, and share the display, not the output of PowerPoint or whatever else is being shared, but specifically the display, and then just let it run the whole time. They'll be able to see perfectly, and then you might have another Zoom instance that's running the camera for them to be able to see easily. So I think that would work really well. You do just have to sort of move the control panel around and find a good spot for that to sit that doesn't get in the way for you as they're doing the presentation.
Good, Courtney.
I kind of prefer the old school approach where you have a camera that shoots the projection screen. If he's going to be standing next to the projection screen, it kind of depends on what's on the projected, screen for the instructions. If it's just like a PowerPoint slides, things like that with large text, you don't need to do screen share if you just have him standing beside it, because I like old school because a lot of times these presenters will put something on the screen and they'll go over and point to it or point with a stick and highlight things on the screen for the people in the room. And that way the person that's watching remotely will be able to see what he's referring to in the old school fashion. And that way you also get to frame up the shot so that you have the presenter standing right beside the screen, and so that you can see the presenter and the screen both at the same time.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, we've done a lot of these where we use the DAC 70, which is by Data Video. So that one will give you VGA in, which can be a lifesaver if somebody comes with an old school device, and you can go VGA in. It looks like this, where you can go VGA in, HDMI in, SDI out, loop through. And so these are a lifesaver when you have a projector, because you can still give the person back or you a monitor depending on the connection. Otherwise, I like NDI, but if it's a presenter's computer and not one you're in charge of, then I wouldn't want to install any software on people's computers. So I like this device. This is one that we carry. So over the decimator, this one has the VGA in, which could be handy. I've even been at places where I was shocked that they still used VGA. So this device has saved the day a number of times. And if it's a one-off, you can just maybe rent one, or like Courtney said, shoot the screen. But if you're doing long-form video, it's not fun to stare at a blurry screen for half an hour. So I try to tap it from digitally.
Next question.
John Foltz from Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. I'm looking for live graphics to an ATEM Constellation. SPX is great. We've got lots of Macs, not much access to Windows. Suggestions or alternatives?
Go ahead, John.
Not my favorite, but capable product is New Blue Titler. I use Live, and it's about $500, but it's got a lot of features and it works fine.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I use New Blue as well. That's a great program for what I do. The other thing is you can just use something like Parallels for Mac. If you've got an older Intel Mac, you can actually install the Windows ISO and do a dual boot, so you can load up Windows right on the Mac and then run your SPX if you're really into using SPX.
Yeah, you can also, and it also depends on when you say you want to do graphics, whether you're trying to do dynamic graphics. So are you trying to get data that's coming in and processing that, or you just want to play out some things? We've seen people use Presenter Pro or Pro Presenter, which is mostly House of Worship, but a lot of people use it because it has a key fill out. Another one to look at is, and that I've used a fair bit, is Softron's On the Air CG. And this one does have a lot of controls that we can dynamically push stuff into it. But you can also even build web pages that are simply over black or over green or over blue and key those out. And so there's a lot of different options there to kind of make that work. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Chad reminds us on the back end that about 10% of SPX users are running on a Mac.
There you go. Jeffrey?
And then, of course, you can also do an AWS session.
Because SPX, I guess, is also, it's just it can be just a web page, right? Because we're using Casper CG for ours, so you could use it on a Mac for SPX. That's good. That's a good point. That you could use it as a web page too. So that's another option for you. Next question.
Robert Shoji from Los Angeles. Any opinions on the musician or Ambisonics plugin for the Sound Devices MixPre units?
Good, Courtney.
Well, I have an opinion on it. I don't actually have them, so I haven't used them because I have MixPre 3, and my 3 is an early one, so it would accept the plugin. You cannot use the Ambisonics on a MixPre 3 because it doesn't have enough inputs. You need 4 mic preamps to run the Ambisonics because it takes four microphones and encodes them into an Ambisonics encoded file. The musician plugin is very interesting if you're a musician. It kind of turns your MixPre 3 or 6 or more into kind of a multi-track workstation. It allows you to do track layering. It'll play back while you record. So you can record and bounce tracks back and forth. You can mix tracks down to bounce them to new tracks and overdub. You can lay in cue markers to go between different places. You can add effects. It has actually has reverb and vocal air. It adds a number of vocal effects. Has a metronome built in. It has input track routing, so you can add a lot of that, mixing, like I said. And you can also import multi-tracks, which is something difficult to do with the other MixPres. You can import a multi-track WAV file and use that as a base track to layer new stuff on top of and bounce the tracks down from that multi-track to less number of tracks. So it's a very competent plugin, and if you're a musician, it'd be a handy thing to have.
Next question.
Stefan Fischer from Würzburg, Germany. My Sound Devices MixPre 6.2 loses connection to Zoom from one meeting to the next. The device keeps being selected, but no sound comes through. No signal on the Zoom meters as well. I have to switch it off or unplug it. Any solutions?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I was under the impression that you couldn't use their USB interface to another device. It's not compatible that way. It needs to go directly into a computer, like a Mac or a PC. So, but I'm not as familiar with it as most of you owners out there, but I would always go with an XLR connection or the mini XLR.
Well, I think he's talking about the USB-C connection to the MixPre, so so that it can connect directly to Zoom.
Right, I wasn't aware you could do that.
Oh yeah. So you can. That's how most of us use it is to have the MixPre connected via USB. I will say that, and I'm trying to dig up the problem right now. We've had some pretty catastrophic failures between Zoom and the MixPre in the latest update with Zoom. So now I have an older OS, so I may bring it up and see if that makes any difference on the computer that I was using. But we've had some issues where it slowly unwinds, like the audio slowly unwinds, and we're not sure whether it's the OS, the MixPre, or or something new in Zoom. But it was working for years with the same hardware, and then it stopped. so it was. So we're still digging into that, but there is something going on there that we're trying to dig up.
Strangely, I was thinking of a Zoom device. Go figure.
Right. Go ahead, Bill.
It's just a really wild one, but I remember on early Macs, and I don't know if this is true of anything else, the bus arrangements on the USB-C ports on the left and right side were slightly different. Again, this is just an edge case, but maybe as one little thing, try changing the connection, the USB-C connection, to a different side or a different port and see if that has anything to do with it. I can't remember what it was, but there was some difference. It had to do with busing and the way they created those early Macs with USB-C. If you're on a modern Mac or a brand new one, probably not relevant.
Next question.
Unfortunately, we were singing the Annie song before we went on the air, and it's stuck in many of our heads. So, Jeffrey, what's the solution for banning a persistent earworm?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I learned this early on, and think of Eric Cartman and Come Sail Away, where he had to actually sing the whole song if he heard any line coming from that. The idea is that you're trying to complete the song, and an average song is 3 minutes, 30 seconds. So you don't complete the song, so you end up in this eternal loop at a chorus or something like that. So the idea, and I actually learned this, John Oliver and Stephen Colbert were doing an interview, and they said, all you have to do is something that completes itself. And commercial jingles are perfect for that because they've got to be completed within only a couple seconds. So the big one is By Menon. So you sing, By Menon. And what that does is that completes any loop, and then any earwig that you have going on kind of falls off into the distance. And you could do that for a lot of different things. They do the that carpet phone number or the Irish Spring thing or anything like that can complete an earworm.
And it also could be a good secret signal that to tell someone that you've been talking about the same thing to me over and over and over again, and just look at somebody that you're talking to and go, By Menon. That could be like your cue, like, loop. Hey, let's stop the loop here. All right, next question.
By Menon. Next question from Stefan Fischer from Würzburg, Germany. Will there be people from our group at the IBC 2022 in Amsterdam?
Yeah, we know of, I think, about 9 or 10 of them because we're doing coverage. So there's a growing team of folks that are going to be covering IBC for a few hours in a couple weeks. They're going to be talking about what they're doing on the 19th. So that is a week from today. So there'll be a breakdown of kind of what the plan is and how they're working through it. We've got a couple. It looks like we're going to have a couple live views and a bunch of gear. So we're slowly growing in how we do this coverage. And so there's definitely a group building. So I'd reach out to. There's a couple people working on it, but reach out to Richard Lavery, and he probably knows everybody that's going to show up so far. So next question.
Douglas Carmichael, would the UPERFECT 17-inch monitor be a useful workaround for the small screen of the 14-inch MacBook Pro in a mobile production workflow? Basically, the portability and train bus plane friendliness of the 14-inch, but the larger screen when you need it.
Guy?
Yeah, I couldn't imagine dangling off the cable on a bus or a plane or anything like that. But I've got them both in my lap here. Let me grab them here. So this is the size of a 15-inch MacBook. That's the 17-inch UPERFECT. So the other thing to think about, though, if you haven't bought the monitor yet, is to go with the mode that I go without the cable, which is then the iPad 12-inch. So to put it in perspective now, this could be wireless. So this you do not have to attach the cable. So that kind of gives you an idea as to size. But yeah, the power, once you settle into like a hotel or a venue, this is a beautiful thing to have because this case folds up. So you can set this UPERFECT monitor on a desk like this. So it's kind of like the iPad case, but then it's powered by USB-C from the laptop itself. And then the way I do it is with another keyboard. So if that keyboard is too small for you, you just want to get another keyboard, another mouse. If you're going to be on like a 3-day event, may as well get everything the way that you want it and then use the VESA mount. So if you want, like Tucker, he built a mount for this. So it's got the VESA mount, and then he mounts it exactly where he wants it in his eye line for his shows. So it just depends on how long you're going to be there and how intricate you want to get your setup. If you're in a hotel room and you're going to be there for a week, you might want to really settle in and get things exactly the way that you want them.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I think a portable screen like that are perfect for when you're doing those sorts of remote setups. The thing that's cool about those, that particular one, is that it does still have a full-size HDMI on it as well. So while you can use the USB-C, which carries power and data, you can also use it for HDMI. And so I've used that type of thing for even the ATEM, and so now you can sort of run your computer through the ATEM, and now you've got your second monitor and you can cut to it and back and forth. And the other cool thing is that little headphone jack on it as well means that you've now got it as a monitoring device. And so I've often plugged that into something that is doing a preview of or the final mix of a show, and then I can easily plug in headphones and have the final embedded mix on that. And the only other thing on that particular brand is that they have both an HD version and a 4K version, and of course the 4K is much brighter and a lot better. So if you could afford it, you'd go to the 4K version.
Good, Bill.
If you want to extend desktop and travel, for me, and other people will be different, if I had a 15-inch laptop, I would want a smaller than 15-inch second screen. And the reason is I want to be able to put everything in a single case. So I actually have two of these Kogotas, and I think they're 14.3 inches. And so when my 15-inch MacBook Pro is folded down, they fit in this same case. So I can actually get my laptop and two additional 14-inch monitors in there, USB-C driven, and that gives me a lot more screen real estate than going with one 17-inch monitor. So it just depends on what you want to fly.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I don't know if you should go for the UPERFECT 17. You might want to go for the UPERFECT Y because that's the touch screen. And now Macs are you can actually do touch screens on there. I have a ViewSonic TD 1633 that you sideload app that actually turns that in, gives it the touch screen ability, and then you can do a lot more without the keyboard and mouse. And then the other thing is, if you've got an iPad or an iPad Pro, more to the point, you can use a program called Duet that will also create a second screen that'll give you the touch screen ability, and it also gives you the high resolution screen.
I'm going to keep on coming back to the fact that I own a 16 and a 14 and would never use 14 for a production machine. Next question.
Next question from Larry in Santa Rosa. Please suggest a low-budget equalizer to use with a Mac to make up for other people's lousy microphones and help with accents.
Go ahead, Jason.
Oh boy. Well, okay, EQ can only do so much. Just remember that. And also, you'd need to ISO each return for this to work. But assuming both things, Rogue Amoeba's audio hijack is pretty good.
Good, Mitchell.
Try to convince them to use a better microphone because if the sound isn't there, you're not going to be able to recreate it without creating other problems. And to the question about accents, I was never aware of any kind of microphone or plug-in that could undo an accent, except occasionally Alex will sound like Bane. I don't know why that happens.
Go ahead, Bill.
Also, remember that if the problem with the audio, what's causing it not to be understandable, is a lag, if something has happened, it's clipped or there's things missing in the signal, there are dropouts, no filtering is going to fix that. If you have a decent waveform and it's just too small or something like that, sure, then things can help it. But just the kind of problem with the audio is going to determine whether or not a solution of adding something is going to fix it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, I think the specific question about accents is really related to that if you have a lot of bass and then someone has an accent, it can be very hard if there's not enough high end. You know, if the voice isn't present and you're not as clear with a thick accent, whether it's an English, someone who speaks English trying to speak Spanish, or someone Spanish trying to speak English, or whatever that is, if it's not clear and it's not present, it can be hard to figure out what people are saying. So I think that might be the challenge there. You know, of course, you can do something like loopback and audio hijack and then run it through audio hijack, do the EQ there, send it back out. That might be something to look at. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is back. What niche do you see the M2 MacBook Air filling versus the 14-inch MacBook Pro?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I don't know whether this is a supply chain problem or a confused strategy, but those two products seem to really be overlapped. And I think the big difference when I look at it is one has a fan in it and the other one doesn't have a fan in it. So if you're going to do a lot of professional work that's going to really stress the machine, buy the one with the fan. If you really don't think you're going to run that fan because the work probably is less than 10 or 15 minutes long and you just want a light, simple machine to do productivity on, go with the Air.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I've just received my MacBook Air M2, and so I've had it for a few days, and I'm loving it. And I love the fact that it hasn't got a fan in it, and it's super light and quiet. And it was something that I had a budget when I bought my studio, my Mac Studio, I could have bought the Ultra, and I decided instead I'll buy the Max, and then I'll buy an M2 MacBook Air when it came out. And that combination is perfect for me. So now I've got a really ultra portable, easy to open up on a plane and things like that, the Air, and then I've got the Studio when I need it. But yes, the other thing with the 14, I understand, is that it still has the older hardware design on the 14. And so there's a few differences there between now the newer Air. But yes, there is a lot of overlap there. That needs to sort itself out.
Good, Bill.
Yeah, what Nigel and Grant both said, and I was just going to emphasize that in the voiceover community, those fanless units are very highly priced because you can bring them in the booth with you and actually record there without the infection of the fan noise getting in your microphones.
Next question.
Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri. How long do you wait to install OS updates on critical systems? Do you have any anecdotes demonstrating the wrong time?
And by the way, for our producers, we're cutting through these questions at record time. So if you have more, you can go ahead and throw them in for the second half hour. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
5 minutes before you start. That's probably the worst time to do it. So for me, when I do an update, I always make sure I have the backup and the time to actually restore the backup into there. And if I'm like, if something's happening like tomorrow or something like that. Otherwise, I'll definitely take my time and understand what gets affected and how it works.
Jason?
On critical systems, the answer is as long as I can. It basically, until I absolutely need to, as part of that production element, upgrade that particular piece of my chain, I don't do it. It's like straight away. And as far as anecdotes, I always have a super duper backup, and never, ever, I'd say more than 2 weeks out.
Courtney?
Never on the same day that you're planning on using that computer. So I've had situations on a video or a television show where I'll get the computers in that have been product placement, so I'll have to set them up to use them in a scene. And they've never been turned on before. And when they turn on, a lot of times they'll want to do updates. And if I don't get those computers at least 2 days before the shoot day, we almost can't use them because they'll be updating in the middle of the show, and you'll have an entire crew getting paid huge amounts of union money, tapping their foot while we're waiting on that update to complete. Oh. And for example, my teleprompting systems are still using Windows XP because it works. The teleprompting software is solid, and it has been working continuously for 10 or 12 years. So there's no reason to change.
Windows. Anyway, Grant?
Yeah, I tend to, a few days before a show, I just go through and do all the updates, and call me crazy, but I like not having any notifications to say that there's updates sitting there. And I kind of think about that there's two sides to updates. One is that it could introduce new bugs, but the idea is also that it's removing some bugs that have been there. And so as long as I have time to do some testing, then I do that. I find that Windows is getting a little bit better at not just doing it whenever it wants. A few years ago, we were mid-show, and the computer just decided now's the time to restart and start doing its update. And I know there's pausing, and in the Pro version of Windows, things like that. There's lots of things and ways of locking that down. But I have found the best way is just preparation before. Just let it do it. Let it do get all the updates out of your system, and then you know that you'll be good for the show, and it works great. Then I check all my software, things like PowerPoint, stuff like that. I want to know that all of that works. Someone brings in some latest feature that they've messed around with in PowerPoint. I know it's going to work because I've got the latest version.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
A quick anecdote: never, ever, ever do an update in the middle of a project.
Yes, Jeffrey.
Yeah, sometimes that can't be helped. Depends on how long the project is. But for me, the biggest thing that I forgot to mention was if you can take the hard drive out. I have a duplicate hard drive right there, and then copy it over, and then do the update. If it fails, you can just pop the hard drive out and back in. I know that's not perfect for those new Macs because those new Macs the hard drives are built right in. But for Windows systems, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's funny what Mitchell was talking about. When I worked on Star Wars, we didn't update After Effects for years because, like we were all the projects and everything else, so nobody updated anything. And the only thing that updated was Electric Image because we were getting new versions every week, based on our requests. so it was definitely updating. But outside of that, After Effects stayed in, I think it was like 4.1 or something like that. And I remember coming out of Star Wars and looking at all of these new features, I was like, this would have been so useful in the movie. And so, but it was like years, it was like 3 years of updates that we hadn't seen because we hadn't upgraded After Effects because you didn't want to change anything. You wanted the pipeline to be able to work and be able to open any project and so on and so forth. I, as a Mac user, I never have my updates on automatic, for my OS. And I usually wait on a current system that I'm getting. It's just a security update. I will usually wait about 2 weeks. So I'll sit there and let it cook for about 2 weeks, and that's mostly to see if anybody online says, "Hey, I upgraded." Because sometimes there's an upgrade, and then there's like a couple days of people being upset that something broke, and so I'm just kind of watching. I'm not taking the front line. I'm not the initial pioneers in the front of that line trying to take Nebraska. I'll just take the next round. And so I wait through that for actually updating OSs. I wait months, to do that. Sometimes years. Next question.
Next question from Tlaloc Miguel Lopez Waterman in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'd like to purchase an Instant 360 for my dad who's teaching a 6-week class, 4 hours every Wednesday. He uses a real whiteboard. He only has an older Intel iMac. Any gotchas there, or are the presets and zooming in hardware?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So to begin with, I think you're talking about the Insta 360 Link, which is a brand new camera that just came out. Justine just reviewed it. I haven't gotten one yet. It's similar to like the OBSBot. It's just basically a PTZ style camera that fits on top of the screen. And from what I understand, it's got a 1/2-inch sensor in it, so it should be able to handle the whiteboard without a problem. But the ultimate result is it will look like a webcam camera.
Look at what Alex has.
I have one. I don't have it plugged in right now because it's a long story. So anyway, I got one a couple days ago, and it is the best web camera I've used. So that I think that's my little review. It is the color resolution or the color quality, the resolution, grain, everything is better than any other web camera I've used so far. It is the software that controls it is the best software that I've ever seen for a webcam. It's relatively easy to use. The unfortunate thing is I don't know how often I'll send it out in kits, mostly because I feel like it'll be too fragile. It's got a lot of little moving parts as opposed to just something that people put on there, but I wish I could. I think that, and then it has basically, if you're talking about the whiteboard, it has these little targets. So you put these targets on the corners of your whiteboard and it will keystone it out and kind of correct your whiteboard. So I'm going to end up using it once I rearrange some stuff here. I'm going to end up using it as a kind of an overhead camera, so that I can show you things on my desk. I have added the extra thing is the Elgato Wave, underslung arm that it attaches to really nicely, so I can swing it around and move it around and have it look at it. One cool feature, there's a lot of cool features on this. Is that you see a window in the control panel. When you want to pan and tilt, you just click on the image and just move it to where you want it to move. You're not trying to say go right, go left, go up, go down. You just click the image and drag it to where you want. Now, if you drag furiously, that's what I did. You will crash the camera. so it's which is actually not that uncommon for a PTZ to have kind of a problem if you jiggle like other PTZs. If you jiggle the arm, sometimes you can get them to crash. And so that's the only downside that I've seen so far. You can also then save those presets. So you can say, I want to be here. Here's a close up. I want a wide. I want over here. And you just keep on hitting save preset. Then you click on them. There's a little bit of delay, so I wouldn't probably want to try to do it live. But cutting in and out of this, I think, is going to be powerful. It's a really compelling camera. Paul Valhus made a big deal about it, and I went ahead and bought one based on Paul being excited about it. And I was kind of like, well, it'll probably be another one. I mean, this is like the 5th camera, non-Brio camera that I've bought that has been underwhelming. And this one's not underwhelming. This is probably going to be something that I may buy more of. So anyway, it's a great step forward. I think it's the first really new webcam that we've seen in the last 2 years. Go ahead, Grant.
Do you think that the pan tilt zoom, when you're thinking about it for a kit, is that an advantage? And do you know if it would be? It would be for us. Camera control, does that work with it? Do you know?
I just don't know. So what we haven't done enough research on is whether there's a good API, something that we can, like set up control for. If there is, then I think if we figure that out, if we figure out that I can remote into it, and I think we actually figured out that you can remote into it through Zoom and do some pan tilt zoom. But if I could figure out a way to have a more organic control over it than that, and be able to really play with it and do what I want to do. We have all kinds of problems with guests who readjust. They set up and get ready to go, and then they lean down or lean over or do something. And this, by the way, also has a great follow feature. So if you set it to follow, it will just wander around with you. It does a facial recognition, and the framing and movement, in my opinion, is actually better than Apple's. So it does a really good job of following you through the frame. So it's a pretty powerful camera. Like I think that for teachers, this is the camera. Now, I don't have it plugged in right now. It's mostly because I just have a limited number of outputs on my computer. So that I have to kind of rearrange here to make that work. But I have I don't know how old when Tlaloc says that it's an older Intel iMac. I have a 2017 iMac that I joined this meeting with. So that's 5 years old, and it worked just fine. I just don't know if it's older than that, but at 2017 iMac, pretty beefy, but not a pro. It's working just fine. Go ahead, Bill.
And I don't know if you were here on either, was it yesterday or the day before Wednesday? Felipe Bias came into the panel, and so he's on the show, and he was using the Insta360. So if you want to see it in actual operation in Zoom, and he and Alex had a chat about it, so there's more details and information there for you.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
The only other gotcha that I can think of, and all of these types of cameras have that, is this is how you go to track yourself. And so if you're using your hands a lot, you're raising your hands, and that thing might see that as, okay, track or no track, and then all of a sudden it'll either start moving or stop moving with you. And I really wish that they would stop using that gesture to make the tracking happen, because they have the zoom in, and I think, what was it? This one is to move it to the whiteboard or to your focus area. So those are less used, but this one's used just a lot.
Harshid?
So would you say, as far as imagery is concerned, this kind of pushes Brio out of that first slot? And as far as me, because I'm vision impaired, would you say that autofocus would be definitely that?
Yeah, its autofocus is good. Its follow through is good, and I will say, I think that the image quality. We have to put it up. I'm going to try to get some charts to put it up against other things, but I think that it's at least as good as the Brio as far as image quality goes, and I think probably better.
So $100 more, and then
$100 more, but a lot more.
Focus. Yeah.
No, I think it's a really, really strong release. And again, I couldn't figure out how Insta360 was going to come up with a camera that was going to be better than all the other ones. But they, and industrial design's really good. It's got a 1/4-20 on the bottom, which is what I'm using now. But it also, of course, can just, if you kind of see it from the side here, whoops, it's got I need another one of these to show this one. But it'll just have a hook onto your monitor or laptop as well. So it's got a couple different options, and a lot of them have that. The one thing about it is it does get really hot. So if you leave it on for a long period of time, it will warm up. I haven't seen it do anything that looked like it was being damaged, but it is definitely worrisome how hot it gets. I think if I built it again, I'd probably build it out of metal and put fins on it. let it dissipate heat a little bit more efficiently. Next question.
Next question from Jacob Goodnight in Indianapolis, Indiana. Why don't Blackmagic cameras have continuous autofocus? Do you think Blackmagic will ever introduce continuous autofocus?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think that they're just afraid to go up against Sony's wonderful autofocus, so I've been told.
Jason?
Well, it's quite simple because cinema cameras don't have autofocus. That's kind of the point of a cinema camera. You actually have really fine-grained control. That's what they want to tell you. The other part of it is that because of the lenses that they use, doing autofocus would be way, way more complicated, and I just don't think that's what they see their niche as.
Bill?
Jason killed it. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, they're not really designed to work with one lens manufacturer the way a lot of other cameras are. And so that integration is going to be much more complicated, as Jason and Bill are underlining there. If they put out autofocus, of course, it would be immediately compared to Sony, and Sony has an exceptionally good autofocus. And then it would be, oh, it's not as good. And exactly what Jason said, that cameras, when you're doing cinema work, you don't expect the cameras to ever have any interaction with the lens. It's really a still photographer kind of thing, and not a videographer kind of thing. Because a lot of times we don't want autofocus because we don't want it to change. I don't want to see it breathing. I don't want to see it do something else. So one of the first things I do with most projects that I have is turn off autofocus. So I think that for a lot of YouTubers and folks that are, that are just doing stuff that's a little bit more run and gun, autofocus is something they like to use. But very few people that I work with ever use autofocus, so it's not seen as a missing piece. Next question.
And the questions from Jonas Dattel in Stuttgart, Germany. Has anyone used a WebRTC server like Antmedia or OME for watching their feeds multiviews?
Grant?
No. No, I haven't. And I was just going to say that we're so much in Zoom now that we set up breakout rooms with lots of multiviews in them for different producers that we have, or show callers and things like that. And it just works so well because having that two-way in that space, being able to just put those in there, and then they can pin whatever they want. They can mute and unmute different feeds in Zoom, it just works so well. So I haven't needed to look anywhere else for any other solution, but it does look very cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of large broadcasters that use it for exactly what feeds and multiviews to send those out. It's they have a lot of control. It's really low lift for them to turn it on. And it works fairly well. I don't think that the image quality, to be honest, if you have a 1080p solution on Zoom, I don't think the image quality is necessarily as good, but there's definitely a lot of broadcasters that are using it for feeds, mostly multiviews, just to be able to see multiviews out there in front of you, and they can just send you a link, and so I've definitely seen Antmedia go by. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is here. When evaluating a mixer's OSC implementation, what essential functions do you expect to be supported, and what would be nice to have?
All of them. I mean, if you don't see just about all the controls over a mixer that is controllable by OSC, you're building any kind of pipeline around it is really dangerous, because you're going to start going, oh, I can do this. The scariest part of any production is to, if you have something that isn't fully featured, you have to be very careful of knowing exactly what that is and what decision you're making, because you'll start going down a path, you'll start doing it, you'll start selling clients on it, they'll start getting excited, and then they'll ask for one more thing that you can't do. Now you set up this whole process that you can't, and it's hard to unwind. And so you just have to, from managing expectations or growing into something, there are very few. I don't know if I did all of it, but it really has to be extensive, or it's not worth going down the path. Go ahead, Jason.
No, I'm going to back you up on all of them. This is like the quandary with it that I have with, the 4 remote controls that are in front of my television, 3 of which I use maybe once a month, but I can't tell when they're going to be necessary. That is the hell that you are getting into if you don't have everything you need.
Yeah. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. Any recommendations for a portable VESA mountable monitor with inputs on the back or anywhere but the sides, 1080 or 4K preferred?
John?
This seems to always be the challenge. Keenan and I are working on a fly pack back here, and we talked about a 1U drawer with two 7-inch video assists that slides out, and then they fold open like gull-wing doors, and then they've got all the connections and the mounts to do that. So that's been a challenge, but that's the best solution that we came up for so far.
Good guy.
Well, he didn't say budget, so here you go. Flanders Scientific's portable monitor page. There you go. You got all kinds of options ranging from 3,200 all the way up to 5,380. And they got inputs on the back just like you want. 4K. Look at those VESA mount. Look at that. Look at that. You can mount that on a C-stand. And it comes with a hood and a nice pouch. So I'll put the link in chat.
Yeah, Flanders Scientific, ICANN, Marshall all make different versions of monitors that will all have inputs on the back. Not necessarily the most cost-effective versions of those, but what I will say is that anything is portable with a large enough case. so it's just a matter of how big the case is and how big the truck is. Go ahead. Let's go to the next question.
Next question from Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. What do you look for in a mobile phone case?
Nigel?
Yeah, so I have to admit to everybody, I'm a serial iPhone upgrader. So I get the new one every year. I'm stuck in the AT&T plan. So the answer for me is a cheap case because it doesn't last much longer than a year and you never know what structure or size the next one's going to be. I will tell you for the last year I've been living with one of these backpacks that go on the Mac backpacks, and I have a mixed view on this. The other day I took this off my phone and the case off my phone, and I thought to myself, wow, that's quite a small phone, because when it's all together, it makes it quite big.
Go ahead, Bill.
I want the least case I can get that provides good edge protection, because if you drop a phone, that's where it's most likely to land on an edge, and it's also where you're most likely to crack things. The other thing that I look for, I like transparent cases because I usually put a couple little score marks there, and that is my lineup guide for when I'm running on the DJI Osmo. And this is light enough so that I can put it on the Osmo without having to go through the hassle of removing the case. So that's why I use these translucent little cases. And like Nigel said, I don't want an expensive one. I put this into Otter boxes and things like that, and I hate it because as soon as I have to use the phone for anything other than just as a phone, getting them out of those things is a mess. In fact, I have a big, complicated case on my iPad, and it's just a nightmare every time I have to take it out of that case. Now, I could probably use it as a football and it would still work because it's a great safety case, but not a great utility case.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I really like these. This is a Pitika. It is Pitaka, and it's a carbon fiber case. And so it's super thin, super light. And as Bill said, it has the side protection on it. And so I've dropped my phone a bunch of times, and it's always fine. It has that real edge kind of protection on it, and so they work really well. I often think about like the quad lock style of cases, because then I really, you can really lock them into your car and on a bike or things like that. And so I am interested in that, but I always come back to something that's almost a naked phone. It's kind of just a tiny little case is what I like. It keeps it nice and light.
Good, Mitchell.
I like this really, really thin case that I have on here. It's you can barely tell it's there, and it works great. This is an old 6, and there are no dents, no dings, no problems with it.
Courtney?
Yeah, I like either silicone or a polyurethane case like this one that's thin, because it has to have a tacky or a smooth, a tactile back on it so that you can hold it. It doesn't slip out of your hands, because phones tend to be all glass these days, and they're like little slippery bars of soap.
Yeah, and for me, I have a couple different versions of it. Depends on what mode I'm kind of in. The Cosmo actually sent me this Peak Design that I use every day. This one goes on. The cool thing is it's a magnet here with a locking piece here. And what's kind of cool is that on this will just kind of, you can just throw it on anything that's kind of metal and it'll just snap to it. This is my wallet. So this just, snaps onto the back. finds its way kind of to the center. And I keep these together because I can lose my phone and I can lose my wallet, but I almost never lose both of them at the same time. There's enough consciousness to it, and it's been great. And if I have more things that I need to put in here, I'm carrying too many things, like in my opinion. So I quickly just go, well, that's too many things. This is the one that I really like this one, and it's got lots of little extra things that you can get for it. So like when I walk into my car, I do pull this off and just snap it onto my car, and it works really well.
Does that magnet interfere with NFT for Apple Pay? For no field? So
works just fine.
Okay.
Yeah, works just fine. I use it. I don't go to stores that don't have Apple Pay. So I mean, like I go to them once, but then when I find out they don't have Apple Pay, there's nothing there that I need. So anyway, so that happens pretty quickly. The other side is from what Tom Ferguson had shown, and this is me putting together this kit right now. I'm slowly getting this ready, Lois, if you're watching. So this is kind of for bird things, but this is a Sound Shark, and this is the who makes this? This is the small rig for the phone, and so in this case, I've got all these little 1/4-20s that are all around the outside edge, so I can put a handle on it. In this case, I've mounted a shotgun or a parabolic mic, and so anyway, so this is kind of I really like these small rigs for production use of the cameras. I mean, I think you need something like that to really make that work. So anyway, those are the ones that I use.
That's great behind you at a rock concert.
You're gonna yeah, exactly.
That's great for a stakeout as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I do
like.
all the stakeouts that I do. No, I'm putting it together. The idea was I'm trying to get in my copious free time, getting a rig together that I can go shoot birds for birding with Lois. And I have it. I think I have the rig all together, and now it's just a matter of time of getting out there and doing it. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. My main presentation Mac Mini is still on Big Sur. Has the corner dot been fixed with Monterey natively, not a third-party fix?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
No.
Oh, so frustrating. Yeah. So in the newest in Monterey, if you have anything that has a video input, you're going to see a little red dot, on your second screen in the upper corner. So if you're outputting playback and so on and so forth, it's something that Apple does for security, and it's super annoying. Like, there's lots of discussions about it. It's not that they don't know it's there. And so there's a hack that you can go in. You can run a hack that they seem to just be kind of looking. We're always afraid they're going to close it, but there's a hack that can turn it off. It's a script that you can run that will turn off the red dot or the orange dot. But Apple seems to be pretty committed to keeping it there. So we're always afraid that they're going to turn it off, and so we have to check that all the time. Next question.
Paul Valhus from Austin, Texas. Apple wants podcast deals that can lead to TV shows. Does this have implications for office hours? What do you think of this initiative?
Yeah, I think it's a great feeder system, for it. So looking at how they can help podcasts move forward and test the waters and figure those things out, and then maybe convert them to something they can throw a lot of money at it's a great business model for Apple to kind of having a farm team. I don't know if it really affects us. I think we're pretty vertical compared to what Apple is looking for, but maybe we can dream. Next question.
James Fosseline from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Bill did great presenting 3-point lighting. When do you use broad versus short lighting for anyone?
I think that's an aesthetic choice based on what you see in your viewfinder. In order to do broad and short lighting, the subject can't be facing directly to you. They have to be looking off axis. Like their eyes can be cut back toward you. And again, in terms of video, because I made a point of lighting that is designed for still photography is designed to get the perfect image at one point. When we're working with video, people are moving around. So, broad lighting or short side lighting, this is broad side lighting because the largest surface is taking the key light, and this would be my short side. Well, if I'm talking to somebody and I'm going like this, what is the broad side and what is the short side? It's changing constantly, which is why we use a bigger field of 3-point lighting. You cast shadows below, but you make sure that somebody's still exposed properly, whichever way they're working. That is different in stills versus video.
All right, go ahead, Courtney, real quick.
Also, if you're using multiple cameras, multi-camera shoot, the cameras aren't on the same axis, so a person's going to look lit differently from each camera position. So broad lighting will give you a flatter lighting, and it will look flattering from almost any angle.
Next question.
Werner in Warsaw, Poland. I'm recording Zoom calls with my Blackmagic Hyperdeck Shuttle HD. For my non-production use case, the files are bigger than Fenwick's sense of humor. What recording format would you recommend?
I didn't know you could write files that big. Anyway, Jason?
You know, I do think you can write files that big, but to do that, I usually plug in USB-C and, get a good 2 terabyte SSD going, and then it doesn't really matter. But no, as long as you're at H.264, you should be pretty much good. And if not, get a Fenwick drive.
Right, Grant?
Yeah, so the 264 has high, medium, and low, and the bit rates. If you're recording a 1080p 30, then you're sitting at 30 megabit per second on the high. It goes to 22 on medium, and then it goes down to 16 on low. You can very comfortably go on low, knowing that you're capturing a Zoom call that is probably sitting around 4 or 5 megabits per second. So 16 is well and truly fine for what you're capturing. And so you should save a lot of disk space there.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, Grant covered it beautifully. Just make sure you never try and record in ProRes or MXF in that shuttle deck, because make sure you're in H.264, because the others are going to be huge files, or at least 10 times the size of the H.264.
Next question.
Stefan Fischer from Würzburg, Germany. Microsoft Teams, what could be the reason that I can select my MixPre 6 as a microphone and it works, but not as a speaker headphone? Well, is it possible to select it, but the sound keeps coming out of my speakers?
Good, Nigel.
Yeah, so I do this every day with my pleasure time on Teams. I have it set up thanks to Mickey with sidetone. So I'm listening to the sidetone and the speaker through the MixPre 3. My audio devices are set to MixPre 3. My speaker is set to MixPre 3, and my microphone is set to MixPre 3. So on Teams, you need to make sure you have all three, and it generally works great. So I don't know why it wouldn't work.
Yeah, the Microsoft has been notorious for this, even back with Skype, is that they will ignore the system setup, the system selections, or they'll pay attention to them, and you don't know which. So you have to set it in your system, and as Nigel said, set it in the app very, very methodically to make sure that everything is set the way you want it. Because we found that sometimes Skype would pay attention. Skype obviously before Teams, but sometimes it would mimic what was going on in the system, and sometimes it wouldn't. And so and that was always been a source of issues for us. Next question.
Talalik Miguel Lopez Waterman in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Where is the best place to order the Insta360 link?
I go, Jeffrey.
Looks like there's only 3 places right now. Insta360, which will probably be your best bet. B&H says it's in pre-order right now. And then, of course, if you want to pay twice the price, you can go to eBay.
Yeah, and I ordered mine from directly from Insta360. I got a little note that it was coming from China. I got updates of when it was in different countries, and it slowly found its way here, and I knew where it was all the time. So the Insta360 website works pretty well. Next question.
And it looks like our last question here for this segment. Cindy Drozda in Erie, Colorado. On the subject of iPhone cases, what do you think of the RF shielding cases? Does it work?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
If it works, you won't have an iPhone. We'll leave it at that. I mean, I've heard of RF shielding bags, but RF shielding cases just kind of seem a little bit counterintuitive to me. I wouldn't go there.
Yeah, I don't know. I would be very concerned that the phone would not work the way you would expect it to if you didn't let it use RF. That's my guess. Let's go to go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, they haven't yet come up with a selective filtering Faraday cage. It only does one thing, and that's block all RF. So there you go.
Yeah, there we go. Jeffrey?
It would be perfect if you need to use your phone in other regards, but you cannot send a signal out. So maybe that's the reason why the case is there.
Yeah. Right. So it's an interesting. I have to admit that I'm not familiar with RF cases, so I was trying to research it as it was rolling through, and I couldn't quite put my finger on like why would I do that? Go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say, we have a transponder so that if we use the freeway lane, it recognizes the car and charges accordingly. But if we don't want to do that, if we're on a day when we don't have to pay anyway, we literally have to put it in a little bag, Faraday cage, and put it in the glove compartment. And so you could do that. If you want to shield your phone from anybody getting to it, putting it in something that will block all RF is fine, but you can't use it at the same time. It's one or the other.
You can use it. You just can't use it for connecting to anything. So you could.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if you pulled out of something and we're using it in its regular mode, it would still be putting out RF.
I just want to say, Cindy, you're a very expensive producer, because now I'm super curious, and there'll be research of RF cases, and then there'll be or ordering of RF cases. So that's what's coming. Thanks, Cindy. Thanks a lot. All right. All right, we are excited to change subjects. We've got Andy, Sam, and Jonathan here. The Zoom crew, our Zoom crew. We're really, really excited to have all three of you here to give us some updates, and then we have a growing number of questions for you. So we're super excited. We're hoping to have this be a semi-regular thing where so people should keep their eye out for when Andy, Sam, and Jonathan are available and when they're coming on, because this is usually one of our best hours of the month. Andy, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so great to be back with everybody on Office Hours again today. We're equally excited to be back. So thanks for having us. A couple of updates for everybody here. Today, I think we're going to demonstrate for you the new companion module that's been built for ZoomOSC and ZoomISO. So in a little bit, I'll turn it over to Jonathan to give you a quick demo of that. As I mentioned last time we were on, this is something that we're working on and building sort of in front of everybody in the community by regularly pushing updates to the open source companion project, both for our module and then the companion at large. So you can go check it out today in the beta builds. But as of last week, we've gotten to a point where we feel like it's something that we really want to share and get you to start playing with, because there's some really cool workflows there. And I'll let Jonathan walk you through all of that in a second. Later today, there'll be a couple new beta builds posted for ZoomOSC in particular that you might want to check out. And then we'll probably do a general release of that in the near future. And then the last thing I wanted to share before we jump into the demo is that Zoom, and specifically Zoom's broadcast and high-end events level solutions, are going to be exhibiting at IBC this year. And at that point, we will share with you the ZoomISO update that we've been talking about. So I'm really, really excited to sit down with you guys again in early September with the field team from Office Hours and show you at our booth what the next iteration of ZoomISO is going to look like. It's something that we're working really hard on to get ready for you. So I'm very excited to share it with you at that time. So with all that said, Jonathan, can I pass it over to you to talk a little bit about the companion module?
That sounds great. Thank you. So I'm going to showcase a bit about the new companion module. We've hinted and we've talked about this before, but there was a previous Liminal ZoomOSC companion module, but it had some issues and we weren't quite happy with the general concept behind some of the variables and the way things were handled. Occasionally, it would not pick up all the data from every user in the meeting. So we've completely redone and built from scratch a new companion module that is available today under the companion beta builds. And I can showcase what this is, but essentially we've redone the workflow to focus on user selection and put the process of getting the usernames of the attendees in your call as the forefront feature to use Companion. So let me showcase this. All right, so adding the connection here, this is the ZoomOSC. So if you go to connections, search for Zoom. Again, this is the beta build. You'll notice there's the Liminal ZoomOSC, and then there's the ZoomOSC. You want to use the ZoomOSC. ZoomISO is a duplicate of this one. It doesn't matter which one you use, but I'm going to go ahead and use the ZoomOSC. All your same selection and configuration options, but there's some new ones here. Selectable groups is a new thing that's been introduced. You can adjust the number that you want to have available to you, and you can change your default selection path, and this can be changed at any time. All right, going over to my device over here. There we go. I just refreshed the items here, but if I go to my, let's see, I go to my emulator. This is an example configuration. I'm going to go to my select user page. Right now, ZoomOSC is in a call, and you can see all these buttons will populate with the name of the usernames. Right now, this is just 1 through 27, just the order of them in the meeting, but we have additional options to have this be based on the gallery layout. So if I wanted to have this match my gallery exactly, I could do that using these buttons as well. But for now, I just want to make sure I get everybody up to 27. We actually have these button presets made for all the way up to, I believe it's, there we go, all the way up to 999. So you can have quite a few of these buttons ready to go for your very large meetings, and you can have multiple pages to cycle between if you wanted to make sure that you, that you had all of that set up and ready to go. And then going back to the controls here, so I have these users, I have the ability to select them, and right now, because I'm in multiple selection mode, I can select more than one, and you can see how many are selected. I can also go to single selection, and you'll see that it goes just between them like that. Selection is synchronized, so once I have select Daniel demo, I can go back to the main page, and I can do all of my typical actions, add spot, clear spot, any other actions that I may want to do, make a panelist, and so on. And this is based on the selection. You can still see that Daniel is selected based on the number in the selection queue here. One thing that's really cool about this, if I go to the users page again, is I'm going to go ahead and select a few users. So select these 3 here, and then I'm going to add them to group 1. So what that does is now I can go back to my first page here, and they're in my group 1, and I can see this here is the people who are in group 1 at the moment. So now I have these 3 favorites, so to speak. Maybe these are my panelists and ones that I want to give special permission for. And I can select these and interact with these exactly as I would on the other page. In fact, if I select Eric and I go back to the users page, you can see that Eric is even selected here as well. So this is a very, very fascinating workflow to be able to look through all of your users in the meeting, select a few favorites and a few highlights, and then work with just those users on your secondary page here. Of course, I have all my traditional options here. You can have a button to send a message to the waiting room, to admit from waiting room. You've got some variables coming back, so you can have a feedback that shows you who the active speaker is as that changes. And then just showing you a few other pages here. I've got another page designed for managing my own video feeds and audio feeds and settings that I can toggle between, screen shares. Then I also have a page for common meetings. So this is where I can plug in meeting IDs of my favorite meetings that I want to join, and I can use the one button to connect to those meetings. So again, this is the new companion workflow, and the way you can start playing around with this is by going to the presets. And go back to the main page here. Select this option here, and you can see these different presets we have created now. Select participants is where you want to start. This is where you can drag the buttons to select by ID, or if you wanted to, you could select by gallery position. And then going back to here, if you want, you can also have your groups if you want to mess around with that, as well as other selections such as user presets, global presets, and this is where you'd find the group indexes for each one of those. You'll also find variables. So this is new variables for different actions within the group, and you can call these back as titles and different names within your buttons. So we're very happy for this. This is still in beta, both because from Companion, it's not been released to the full Companion build, but also because there are a few buttons and a few things which are not quite hooked up or working yet, but it is exciting to see this. One thing we are still figuring out is some of the feedback options. So for example, right now, if I raise my hand, you'll see a cute little hand icon next to the user with the hand raised. And this is something, of course, that's configurable, but that's using the PNG toggle on and off feedback effect. So again, really excited about what this can enable. And we wanted to make sure that the core element of selection is really the focus of this companion update.
And just a couple of quick things I would just tag on at the end there, maybe. Jonathan's absolutely right that the hallmark of this update is the fact that everything is built into these presets. You don't have to go in and program all these keys from scratch like our older modules were focused on. The old modules had all the data, they had the presets to do all the actions inside of the drop-down menus, but now we focus entirely on what we sort of looked at the user group and said, okay, what are you actually doing? What does that data tell us? We optimized this module for the specific workflows that we saw people doing, which were selecting people either by an index or by the gallery position. Again, why do you want both of those? One of them is going to be a static list. So if you're building muscle memory, those names aren't moving around. Or if you want to have the gallery view as your visual reference, you can have the keys moving around to match the gallery view if that's how you'd prefer to work. So there's merits to both. And then once you've done selection, you want to be able to stash those into groups and then apply actions either to the group as a whole or see the individuals in that group. But all the same whole plenary of ZoomOSC user actions, global actions, feedback variables are still available to the module. We've put front and center the things that we see most people wanting to do. So as Jonathan said, we're really excited to share that with you. We hope you check it out and let us know how it's going. It is in beta, but it's the other part of it being in beta is that this is an opportunity for us to hear your feedback and implement it into the module before it goes out into the full release. So we have a couple of more things that we want to tighten up about it, but we would love to, we've set aside this time to be able to solicit that feedback. So we would love to hear it from you. We are building this for you. And so we would like to make sure it's something that serves you well.
Amazing. And so you can interact with a group as a whole. So you can say, I want to bring all these people to the stage. I want to bring, I now want to go to my next session. I'm going to hit a button. It grabs the group, brings them on. That's one of the possible operations.
Yeah, so imagine you have 3 sets of panels that you're going to have during a Zoom meeting, and you have them online. Maybe you go to your gallery page and you start picking, okay, this is going to be my first panel, add to group 1. This is my second panel, add to group 2. This is my third, add to group 3. Then you go to a different page where you see each of your groups available, and you might just say, all right, spotlight everybody in group 1. Now you have like a 4 up, right? And then clear spotlight everybody in group 2, that kind of thing. Yeah. Also people to watch, right? So if you want to have, people who are going to be speaking and you want to know when they raise their hand or something like that, you can have them sorting around, and the feedback, the buttons can be changing color. You can even do things like monitor their audio and video state. So you could say like, hey, if anyone in my panel that's coming up doesn't have their video on, I will see that as a button on this key. So it lets you focus on the Stream Deck as your interactive tool versus the Zoom client.
It's really powerful. Mitchell?
Yeah, I have a question real quick. I'm using MixEffect, and I have a beta version of Companion. Will that be compatible to what you're working?
Is MixEffect now worked back into the main Companion builds? Are you going to BitFocus website directly to get those?
Not quite. It's still using a beta version of Companion for the presets.
So it's a branch then. It's not just a beta. It's ATEM's branch of it. That's something I can check with ATEM on, is whether or not that has merged back into the main Companion group. But if it's a branch, he probably would have to remerge our changes into his branch. It's not something that we can grab back unless he's hosting it in an open source area. But I would suggest to check in with ATEM on that, and I'll ping him and see what we can do there, because there's a huge synergy to using them together.
Yeah, Grant.
Nice work. That's really cool. I love that group. Setup is really nice. I wonder if on the roadmap you have breakout room control. I know that getting the steps right with settings and opening and things like that is crucial to making that work. But do you see a time where you may be able to make that work in Companion to be able to do breakout room control?
So that's today. So all of the user actions of ZoomOSC are there. So the breakout room commands are also there. So as you say, very, very important that you get the order of operations correct with breakout rooms. The Stream Deck might mislead you into thinking that you can do things in any order you want because it's just a button pad. But you have to, create the rooms, open the rooms, send people to the rooms, or create the rooms, configure the rooms, assign people to the rooms, open the rooms, right? So and we tried to, in our documentation, we tried to lay out, like what is that actual order? And so you'll see that we still refer to our breakout room commands as being in beta. And it's not because we haven't tested and tried them. It's because it's complicated. And the beta flag we felt would force people to actually read the documentation and figure out how to do it, because it's a little bit of a complex process. But absolutely, as with any user action, just like adding to Spotlight, breakout room assignment is on the same playing field as that inside of the module. So you'll see that as an available option, and you should be able to do it today.
I will add to that as well, though. Well, like Andy said, we do have full control over the breakout rooms in Companion. What we do not have is variables for the names of the breakout rooms. So you would have to identify the breakout rooms by index. But this is something we'd love feedback on. If you think that it would be helpful to have those listed as a callback within Companion, so that you can have buttons for the specific names of the breakout rooms and then assign users to those breakout rooms by name. That's something we can look at. I'm not sure exactly how that would work or when would be the best time to pull that data, because again, like Andy said, there's a specific order that things have to happen. So we're interested in exploring that. But I do think that basic level breakout room control does work today with Companion.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
There have been a lot of people that have been really concerned about because they're running 2 to 3 Stream Decks, sometimes on the same machine, sometimes on different machines, because 2 or 3 different people are doing the same thing. And so my question is, are you guys planning for a multiple Stream Deck option? Because I know with Companion, you put it on one machine. You use 2 Stream Decks on the same thing, whatever. If you're on page 1 on Stream Deck 1, you're on page 1 on Stream Deck 2. And that's one of the things that they're trying to figure out is how can I get it so Companion will allow me to have page 1 on this Stream Deck and page 2 on this Stream Deck. So that I bring it to you, if we set it up for multiple uses through different machines, will that work the same?
Yeah, so what I was going to answer on that is one of the things I have Jonathan doing a lot is building out the companion profiles that my team is using on our shows ourselves. So we're using ZoomISO, we're using vMix as we do the video production. And the setup that my team has is 2 XLs with a regular Stream Deck above it. We've got a little 3D printed mount that locks them all together. So that's kind of the base that Jonathan's working with on a daily basis, is thinking about these 3 Stream Decks. And what they'll do is they call it sidecar. So they'll have like this one XL never changes. It always has these buttons available to me at hand, ready to go. Whereas what it'll typically do is pull up almost like folders across the other Stream Deck. So if I hit a button here, it opens my selection page on my other XL instead of actually changing pages itself. So that's definitely in our thought process.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I know it's a little off topic, but Jonathan, your setup looks brilliant. There's a lot of chatter in the back end talking about how...
Yeah,
are you using Zoom Blur for that background?
I'm not. I actually am using a GH4 camera. I've got a bunch of these Lumix GH4s left over, and they work well for this.
Yeah,
congratulations.
So it's a really rare thing to have these 3 folks, grace our presence here. So if you have questions, this is the time to ask about this release or about ZoomOSC, ISO, Zoom. These are the experts. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and jump into the questions.
Jonas Dottel from Stuttgart, Germany. Any updates on NDI and breakout rooms for Zoom rooms?
Go ahead, Andy.
Nothing that I can share at the time. Thank you all, though, for submitting the tickets. They have been helpful, and hopefully you'll hear more from us on this in the near future.
Next question.
Roy Myers from Bel Air, Maryland. Can I create a join link for a participant that sets their display name for the meeting? My intent is to use that display name to validate who they are and then use ZoomOSC to automatically move them to a breakout room.
Go ahead, Andy.
This is a great opportunity for Obvio and ZoomOSC to work together, because and I see Grant raised his hand about this, so I'm excited to hear him talk about it. But the way I would do it is, the brilliance of Obvio is that the token is embedded in the join link so that they join as this virtual user with a specific name. So that would allow you to, and then you disable renaming in the meeting. Now you're assured from registration to join who this person is. And then ZoomOSC can kick in and work with Obvio to figure out what to do with them once they're in there. So I'd love to hear what Grant thinks about that.
Go ahead, Grant.
Thank you, Andy. I wasn't even going to mention Obvio, but just what we're doing in the background, and that is we're registering people for the meeting. And so when you register someone, you get a join link, as Andy said, with a token in it. And this is the same as like the after hours registration link that you get, right? So whatever you registered your name with is what you go into office after hours with. And so there's a few different ways of doing it, but it is particularly helpful when you can automate that process using the Zoom API. And all you're really doing is handing it a first name, a last name, and an email address, and then it will give you that join link. So what we're doing with our system, because we do these large events across multiple meetings, one of the things that we do is we prepend the room number, the meeting number, and so we might have 50 rooms going, and so we put the name at the start, the number at the start of their name, and that helps us track them all the way through, and then we can easily identify when we have them on a gallery wall, for example, we can see their name and we can see which room they're in, and so with what you're wanting to do, yes, you can absolutely do it. You can control the name, and then I guess, Andy, you could also speak to that second part, which is seeing that name as a unique identifier, seeing that come in, ZoomOSC seeing that, and then pushing them directly off, having a series of functions that's looking for particular names, I guess, right?
Exactly, because at that point, what you've done is you've turned the name into a unique identifier, and we can't always assume that, right? We don't, even our Zoom IDs that we expose in ZoomOSC aren't necessarily persistent across the meeting, across multiple instances of ZoomOSC, or even if that user were to leave and come back, it's not a UUID, right? But if you've enforced registration and you have this unique name, now you could go into the backend system and say, all right, when I receive the OSC command for join meeting, and I see this user come online with this name, now I'm going to reply with a /Zoom/username/send a breakout room command with that name as the argument, and that little automation, be it in Isadora, Node-RED, whatever, system can listen and basically build an input-output pairing system, would then achieve this type of automation. But the key is to turn it into a persistent ID by some sort of registration process.
Next question.
Roy Myers has another question. In a Zoom meeting, can I have a breakout room where everyone but certain designated people are muted? Would I use ZoomOSC to continually iterate the participant list and mute people who have opened their mic?
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, that's correct. You could definitely accomplish this that way. One thing to mention is that you wouldn't need to be completely scanning the list all the time. You could just wait for the callback action from ZoomOSC that a user has unmuted, and then have just a simple loop to take their ID and mute them based on their Zoom ID. So this could be definitely accomplished using a simple loop trigger and that callback.
Go ahead, Andy.
The only other thing I'd add, like Jonathan said, you're listening to the callbacks, you could screen them against people that you want to be allowed to talk. So this is one of those things where you can kind of turn a meeting into more of a webinar style delivery format, where you can choose to elect certain users who can freely turn their camera on and off, and then suppress the video or mic on state of all of the other users if they don't match when you get that callback on their name. Because right in the Zoom client, you can only globally set whether or not all users in the meeting, besides I think the hosts and co-hosts, can do this. But if you want to have more granularity than that and elect certain participants, even that list could change and mutate over time, right? Depending on how you program it ahead of time, you could just immediately reply to any video on or microphone on with a mute and video off, except if the name matches some list. And this is the kind of thing, again, that Universe, Isadora, Node, all that stuff would allow you to do.
Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida. Zoom digital camera blur. Will this feature be adjustable to a lesser, more subtle degree in the future?
Go ahead, Andy.
I don't have an answer for the feature itself. I did want to ask Sam, though, what your general guidance is on the use of the different Zoom settings features, like when you're trying to onboard talent. Like I know you have some settings that you do jog and adjust. What are those, and how do you use them?
Yeah. So from an event services standpoint, whenever we're looking at having virtual presenters coming onto a call, we definitely start with, get me the nicest background you can get. Find a nice wall, find a nice lamp in the background like Jonathan has, something with some visual interest. Let's make it look cool. If that means that I have to have you pick up your laptop and start walking around your house, great, let's do it. Let's go walk. Let's find a stool to set the laptop on to get it to the right height and pile up some books and make it look nice, right? From there, if we have a presenter who just doesn't have that, isn't able to do that, isn't willing to do that, then we step into, okay, well, my next preferred would be go ahead and use the blur. If your background doesn't look nice, let's start with the blur and see what that looks like. And yes, it's typically pretty heavy-handed. So from there, we then go into like, okay, do you need to do a virtual background? If you do need to do a virtual background, no text. Because a lot of the time we're taking it and we're taking your 69 video, we're turning it into a 4:3, we're turning it into a portrait, we're turning it into a 1:1, whatever we're doing, we're frequently cropping those sides at different parts of our show. And if you put a logo up there, you put text, you put your name, whatever, good chances are that we're going to cut it off at some point or need to center you or something like that. So that's kind of where we start. We, like most of you out there producing events, don't get what we want all the time. So, you kind of have your preferences, but definitely, we subscribe to the same mindset as you, that all the things that you've heard Alex say time and time again about the sort of subconscious ease that you can put a mind to when it's not having to fight with focal length differences and what's going on with the depth of field and why are they in the middle of a forest or any of those things.
One of the things that this conversation came up is because we were testing the new little the Insta 360 Link, which we think is probably the best webcam that's been released in the last couple of years. And Felipe, who was showing it a couple of days ago, had the M1. The Mac has its own blur, and it was about a third of what the Zoom blur was. And we suddenly were like, oh, that's okay. That looks like a camera. And we suddenly, we hadn't had that conversation. And so that's what this kind of got pushed into the conversation of, wouldn't it be great if we had 2 or 3 or 4 versions of blur that could be applied, via Zoom, that might be, because it would look less fake. If it was just a little out of focus, people would probably, because he still had a couple little edge issues, but you don't notice it as much when it's a little out of focus compared to when it's a lot out of focus. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think one of the problems is that the implementation of this feature is designed to just hide people's backgrounds as an alternate to virtual backgrounds, not to look aesthetically pleasing. Right. But I'm excited to see more people use continuity camera and to use some of the iPhone, portrait mode and some of that very beautiful looking simulated blur, and to see if that sort of sets an example and inspires Zoom and others to have better algorithms and better tuning for their blur backgrounds.
I mean, I think that it could be, nothing, I know that nothing that's a feature is as simple as, but literally just a camera blur versus other blur, classic blur. Like you could have classic blur that's going to, and just have camera blur, which is just, looking a bit like yours, Jonathan, or Andy's or Sam's, just a little softer, not a lot softer, but I'm just going to soften up the background so that I step forward. But that's all I want. I'm fine to show you what's back there. Let's go to the next question.
Next question coming into us from Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany. Zoom and MixPre 6.2 again. How can I level up my own voice compared to the sound of the other participants when using headphones out on the MixPre?
Guy? I don't know if that's necessarily a direct Zoom question, but go ahead, Guy.
Sure. The way that I have it set up is that I'll put the USB from the computer on 1 and 2, and then myself on 3. So then I'm using the headphone volume level on the side, on the side of the unit to turn everybody up. And so once I lock in, let's say for this show at negative 24 lefts, I'm going to leave that, and then I'm going to ride my headphone on the side, and that's a custom headphone preset. But if I need to turn everybody else down or up, that's how I turn them up and down on 1 and 2. So that should, if you do it that way, you should have full control.
Next question.
From Roy Myers in Bel Air, Maryland. In a Zoom meeting, would like to have some breakout rooms, general admission, others to be co-host only, or push certain people into them via a co-host. Is this possible?
Go ahead, Andy.
Well, not just with the general Zoom breakout settings. However, I would say that feature requests that focus on improving breakout rooms are never a bad thing. So please do send those in if you have more ideas about customized breakout behavior. That being said, now that ZoomOSC has full control of the breakout rooms and it knows the role and privilege of everybody in the meeting, you could disable the ability for attendees of a meeting or participants in a meeting to self-sort into breakout rooms, and instead use ZoomOSC to inspect their role code and assign them to the correct breakout room based on that. So that would be a bit of a build inside of maybe Isadora, looking at the role codes through the list output of all the ZoomOSC outputs, and then looking at the breakout rooms and dividing them into buckets and then assigning them to those rooms. So it could be possible with some upstream or external tools, but that's not a feature of the meeting client today.
And those role codes are the standard role codes, or are they infinite? It's just the co-host, host?
I suppose it depends. I mean, so ZoomOSC's role codes are going to be the Zoom group, but as we said before, you presumably you could define, specialized roles that are external to Zoom that just use name matching or whatever to determine that this person is this, right? So, one of the things that we like about ZoomOSC having full breakout room control is that, that whole pre-registration system for breakouts that's entirely dependent on you like uploading a CSV and crossing your fingers as people log in with those email addresses. Doesn't matter. When you have ZoomOSC there, you can just write it up which way you want. And then you can look for the username or whatever parameter it is. Again, if you combine that with registration, now you know what that name is going to be. So you can have a very, very customized set of behavior for breakout rooms that's exactly the way that you're looking for it to be when you start to use ZoomOSC with it.
And but all of it would need to be in the name, right? Like it would need to be like if it wasn't a standard thing, you need to have some. I guess you could have a code, and then in the back end, this would be kind of an obvio thing. Would be connected to that code could be multiple roles.
Yeah, look what we do here for office hours, where everyone's got a number in their name in Zoom that corresponds to some designation in Mukana, right? So absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, the reason what we had an event that didn't happen, but we were thinking about, there was like 15,000 people, and that we were bidding on, and the thing that we had to do is we want to for some breakouts we want to break them all out by region. So Nigeria goes into one, or Kenya goes into another. But in some cases, we want to have it just be people who have a certain role. This is what they do in that region, and we're going to group them all to a breakout room that looks like that for that specific thing. And then we want to break these into certain sessions if there are going to be multiple sessions. And so it seems like that would be. And again, I think that would be. That's where you give them a number. They're not just a number, but the number that then you can build that role system in something like Avio or something else that's there that you can now do multiple breakouts and all day, just hit a button and everyone goes to a different grouping of breakouts based on that process. I think, that's what it sounds like could be possible. Grant?
Yeah. We've done some things just like that. And one of the things that we've used is emojis in the display name. So it's a little known fact that they work, but not all of them. That's what's weird.
Just some of the emojis work.
So one, a task that we had to give someone was go through all the emojis and tell us which ones work in Mac and PC in Zoom. And there's some variation on which ones work in Mac.
How many emojis work?
Probably like 20 or so. Right. And so for some of the events, we have, it's all hidden code, hidden code, but it means things to the people running the event, the hosts of the event. And so they see someone with an aeroplane in the end of their name.
Of course, you got all these participants who are like, "Why am I an airplane?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then there's a little tree, and and so there's a leaf clover and things like that, right? So there's these different ones that work, and we know that means that this person has an income bracket of X or whatever it is, right? So it's very, very handy. But I think when we're talking about roles, if we're thinking of getting the office hours feature request army in action, I think there is a real need for even just one more role in between a standard participant and a co-host. Because when we're talking about breakout rooms, it's all too easy for any one of those co-hosts to close all breakouts. Unfortunately, I've been on a couple of shows where that's happened, and because we've needed to give some people a little bit of elevated access to be able to control in the breakout room, you want them to be able to mute people and things like that, right? And so they need to be a co-host. Once they're a co-host, they can close all breakout rooms. So even just the slightly elevated role that gives them the ability to sort of be a moderator, that's the type of term that could be helpful, that they're able to mute video and turn off video and mute someone, but they can't do any of the more of the control of the system. That type of thing is what we really need to run some of these large events.
And in some ways, rather than figuring it out, what we kind of need is kind of what Discord has, which is I have a role that I create, and then I have this long list of what that person can and can't do. So I just call it a role, and then I just have this mind-numbing, in Discord, it is a mind-numbing list of you can do this, but you can't do that. You can do this, but you can't do that. But that role means something. and having kind of an advanced role, like instead of trying to figure out every role that needs to be there, but having the ability for, producers to be able to define roles and define all the things that they possibly could do in the Zoom, and then save those out. I know that's probably a real headache.
It feels like a bigger
on the
lift,
Zoom side.
doesn't it?
Yeah, but it would be that'd be a big lift. But that's why we're here, to make crazy
What's the
requests.
Bare minimum. The bare minimum is just being able to give them,
Grant's
just a little bit.
Grant's like, let's stick with the MVP. Like how do we stick? Stay focused. Go ahead, Andy. Oh, you were saying something. I thought you were leaning into something. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, again, I'll give my disclaimer that I haven't given today of I'm not on the product team. I don't talk roadmap, but I figure out how to use stuff today. But as you guys are asking for feature requests, maybe if you point out the fact that sort of role-based management that you just described is how the portal works for Zoom account administration. You are able to create roles, define them, give them a name, and then go down that huge list of permissions. What can I do? Do I view access, edit access? So that style of management is not brand new to Zoom. It does exist somewhere in the platform.
That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida. Will Zoom ever host a vMix-like virtual switcher for professional virtual event production?
Go ahead, Andy.
So I can't speak to, whether we will or won't do something inside of the client. And frankly, I don't necessarily know everything about what happens here at Zoom. But what I can tell you is how I would do some of these things today. I think you saw at the beginning, some really interesting switcher-like behaviors that can be accomplished with spotlighting and multi-spotlighting and managing that from a Stream Deck, building groups of spotlights as presets that can be recalled, as a group. That gives you some level of flexibility. Now combine that with name tags for webinars, webinar backsplash, that gives you the sense of branding, and you're on your way. You can begin to combine other features, right? Like you can look at Zoom apps, which start to, build a little bit more complex visual behavior, things like camera mode inside of Zoom apps that bring in, extra content. Maybe if you don't want to use name tags, but you want customized lower thirds, everyone can run warmly, for example, and that has a nice little, frame for everybody in there. So again, I view the Zoom client features as being the things that'll be most impactful for the majority of people, right? And there are a bunch of ingredients today that you can kind of mix together if you know what you're doing. And, while you're not necessarily getting vMix level production, maybe you're getting, 50, 60%. You can control who we see. You can control some things about the branding and experience of how we see them. That's no joke, right? That can help, bring the look and feel of Zoom more into your brand and more into your produced style experience.
Absolutely. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer is back. Can you discuss Zoom Intelligent Director?
I can say a quick thing about it. Admittedly, there's not a lot of information publicly available about it. It's similar to the other capabilities that Zoom Rooms have for handling the idea of, what are we going to do when we have a bunch of people in a physical space and a camera or set of cameras looking at them? And it's just, like you can see with Smart Gallery and things like that. I think it's something similar to that. I frankly don't have all the details, so I don't want to talk out of turn, but I think it fits in that class of features.
Next question.
Hasmut Gajar in Cape Town, South Africa. When selecting the beta companion, does a current dated beta include the ZoomISO OSC build?
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, so how do you read that list, right? So when you go to the beta build section, everything is additive. So if you scroll down the list and you see that a ZoomOSC update was done, and if you look at the red header of every build and you see the ZoomOSC feature is there, that build set and everything above it should contain that set. Now, that's not necessarily saying anything about whether you should or shouldn't use that build, right? If your primary purpose for grabbing a beta is to use ZoomOSC, best to introduce the minimum number of variables, right? And just get the build, unless you see something like a core companion feature has been, or bug has been resolved, because you can see all the release notes for what everything is doing here. So I would say either stick to the ones that have a header as, ZoomISO, ZoomOSC being updated, or ones that you see core companion having an update. That way you're introducing the minimum number of variables. Other manufacturers aren't, getting in there. And companion is pretty good about, making it very modular from a developer perspective. So one module is not necessarily going to introduce a bug that could break all your other modules, but you never know, maybe another module that you use has been updated and it changes a way that, ZoomOSC maybe is fine, but this other module that interacts with it could be wrong. So just, I would just read through the release notes. But yeah, anything above the builds that say, ZoomOSC feature introduced or whatever, that would be containing everything. It's additive.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I actually went through the builds to try and find that specific one, but I couldn't find anything that said ZoomISO or ZoomOSC. Do you have like a
6 days ago
like
or 7 days ago now? Yeah, 7 days ago now. Yeah.
Cool.
That's great. Now, next question.
And it's from Douglas Carmichael. He asked, what specific reasons are there for not adding NDI to the base Zoom client?
Go ahead, Andy.
So I'd say that it is in the base Zoom client. It's in it in two ways. It's in it in a Zoom Rooms client. But if you mean the more typical meeting and webinar client, it's also in that client, and that's ZoomISO. ZoomISO is a Zoom meeting client. It is the meeting client form factor, and it has all the dedicated controls for NDI and Siphon and all of that stuff bolted onto it. That is the value proposition of ZoomISO. It is a meeting client form factor version that adds production export protocols. So we solved that problem today. ZoomISO is an official Zoom client. It's a client optimized for production, and it is exactly the meeting client form factor.
And as a reminder to everyone here is that from 3 o'clock till 6 in after hours on today on Fridays, we're opening it up. Normally, we don't want people to record after hours or start doing a lot of things that have it constantly throwing up windows. 3 to 6 on Fridays is the one exception. So from 3 to 6 on Fridays, if you have things you want to test, we encourage our members to jump in so that there's lots of windows, and it's turning into a little bit of a TGIF. So people are just, because they know that they're just there to be guinea pigs. So they're up there and in there, and then other people are jumping in with NDI with ZoomISO and kind of grabbing those signals and pushing them out. So it's becoming slowly becoming kind of a fun time to play with these ideas. So again, it's Friday 3 to 6 Pacific Standard Time. And we're going to keep doing that to allow people to have, we just realize it's just hard to get 10, 20, 30 people with their cameras on that have reasonably good signals to be in one place. And so we're going to make that continually available. Next question.
No Big Bunny, by the way. Next question.
No Big
from
Bunny.
Scott.
Do not play the Big Bunny. No Big Bunny.
No Big Bunny. Scott Mueller from Germantown, New York. Can you share your export for your whole configuration with all those companion pages you showed us?
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and share that. I think I'll do so in the office hours Discord. Some of the buttons, I will say, may not work at the moment. We are definitely still in the process of going through testing and verification of all of these buttons and all of these presets. But go ahead and give it a try, especially the selection workflow, and let us know your feedback.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, when will we see a ZoomISO audio?
Go ahead, Andy.
If you need it today, you can look at the ISO audio that comes out of Zoom Rooms, which has the embedded audio in it. Other than that, check back with me at IBC.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Brea, California. Are you getting any specific feedback from colleges or teachers who are still teaching many courses online? Are you looking for beta testers from education?
On this, Zoom is certainly getting this feedback, no doubt. I don't know what the specific process is if you were to advise somebody how to do that. Sam, maybe you know that one?
No, I was going to say largely the same thing, that I don't know who I would put you in contact with directly, other than the fact that we are actively engaging in that with several different colleges, and I'm sure we would love to get yours in as well, as they're looking at what's the future of education truly in a hybrid world with those virtual components as well.
Yeah, and it's something that we're going to be digging pretty deep into in our education efforts as we go into the fall, is really looking at, we're kind of re-gearing Saturdays for educators. And so that second hour, right now, Saturdays is a 2 hour of just Q&A, but eventually in that second hour, we're going to add education subjects. So, and they're going to, one of them's going to, 1 month, once a month, there'll be different things for educators. And one of them is going to be Zoom. Another one is going to be, presentation, whether it's Keynote or PowerPoint. Other one's going to be how to use video in the classroom. So these are all coming up, as those second hours. And we kind of we took the time off over the summer, but expect us to be kind of really digging into how do we use these in a classroom environment as we go into the fall. Next question.
Scott Mueller from Germantown, New York. Will the ZoomISO update allow you to save presets that default certain ISOs to specific screens with full screen resolution for new calls?
Go ahead, Andy.
Well, again, I can't speak to what the next iteration of ZoomISO will and won't do, but I can tell you that the current version of ZoomISO basically does this for this show today. It's not necessarily a preset, but it's an automated assignment based on who's in the meeting and all of that stuff. So one of the things that's really nice about ZoomISO that makes it unique, in my opinion, is the marriage of Zoom-based data and properties to the configuration of outputs, and all of that being exposed through an open API, right? So in this case, it's Isadora detecting the names of people and assigning them to outputs in a programmatic way, a predictable way, but that could just as easily be broken out to a Stream Deck for you being able to manually assign, from a single button pad how it's done. And the beauty of it is that it's all the same protocol, it's all the same commands. You're relating the Zoom data to outputs. And then again, once you've done that, now a participant with all these properties is this physical cable or this video signal. One of the things I love so much about this show is that we are now combining data from 5 or 6 different vendors, some of which only know how to talk about specific video inputs, some of which know how to talk about specific properties in the Q&A system. And that all marries now to Zoom data. So you can build these really beautiful automation systems combining all of that data. And I think this show is a flagship of that potential.
It seems like a simple show. We're just kind of cutting back and forth. But as Andy said, there is, Mukana is handing like who are going to be the people that are going to answer the next question. They're handing that to Isadora. Universe is the web interface that talks to Isadora. SPX is getting the data for what to put in those lower thirds. So all of that stuff is all automated and it's all running through, Isadora is running that, but it all builds around ZoomISO and ZoomOSC. None of this works without it. And so it's I know the goal is to keep it that it doesn't look special when you're watching it. It just looks like a show, and we're constantly evolving it. It's an incredible team in the background. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer is back from Viera, Florida. Will the ZoomISO update allow for search of meeting participants by name? In large meetings, late joining presenters can be hard to find.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, again, I can't speak to whether this will be in the UI of the next ISO version, but I can say that we encounter this problem very often today. And the way we solve that is by building a customized interface for the type of show that we're trying to produce. So the list output, which you get by putting a license into ZoomISO, exports all the participant names over OSC. Then we have custom interfaces in Isadora or Universe that can allow you to type into a search bar and you can get a reduced, match. And then you can say, okay, I want this on this output or whatever. And that's kind of nice too, because, we offer one user interface inside of ZoomISO for managing this. And it's more of a drop-down list or maybe the participant matrix, if you want to call that too. But, if you want to be dragging things to connect or whatever, you want to have, all your inputs on one side and all your outputs on another side, or maybe outputs first, selected, then inputs. I know that's more maybe of a common way of working with the video matrix. It's all possible through the OSC connection. So we let you build whatever UI flow you want. There's a file that you should ask support for called example ZoomOSC connect.izz. It's an Isadora preset file that is basically this. It's a filterable list. So you can type in the name. You can also filter by roles, video on, audio on, co-host, hand raised. And you can build this filter that will break down the participant list into a subset group. And then you can assign, I think we don't let you assign outputs in that preset file, but you can mute, spotlight, all that stuff there. And because output ISO is just another ZoomISO specific user action, you can do it there. This is also an area where I recommend Zoom Event Services if you need a customized interface that is, bespoke for a specific type of show. That's something that I know Jonathan does all day long. So the infrastructure is there for this.
Next question.
It's a question for me. My purpose on Earth is to find the best way to mute and unmute my mic on Zoom. I've tried using Stream Deck, but the problem is it doesn't always work. Can this be improved?
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah. So, if you wanted to, you could give ZoomOSC a shot and try the OSC-based version of, /Zoom/me/unmute or /Zoom/me/mute and tie that out to a Stream Deck. Now, of course, if the issue is the physical capability of the Stream Deck itself, less helpful, right? Yeah. But there is, I forget exactly how it's done, but there's a way to remotely tell even the vanilla Zoom client to mute or unmute, but it's kind of on all the downstream systems to achieve that. I typically find that the issue is I will do it with a keyboard and mouse to hit my mute button. I find that that's pretty reliable. The spacebar is finicky just because sometimes you forget what the state of that is. And then the third-party controllers, it's unclear always what the connection to it will be. But one of the things that we are pushing a little bit with this companion update is ZoomOSC for personal contribution and breaking out all of the behaviors to whatever interface you want in whatever way you want. I've seen accessibility uses of this as well. So customized foot pedals. We had an interesting one, which was there was a pottery making class. So their hands are, full of the pottery, stuff. And so they had a variety of foot pedals in front of them for the host of this session to spotlight different people and unmute different people. And they were just using a variety of foot pedals, sending OSC commands to ZoomOSC to manage the meeting. So their hands were free. And we've seen that also in the accessibility space, obviously for people who don't have full faculty of those capabilities, right? So a lot of options there for interfacing.
Go ahead, Sam.
I was just going to add that, obviously, global shortcuts is, if you're doing it with a vanilla Zoom client, global shortcuts, so that keyboard shortcut that Stream Deck is ultimately using, it does work when you're not the active app window. I'll also say that global shortcuts are kind of the bane of my existence. Last time I tried to turn them all on and I turned them all back off. I remember being in a meeting where I was typing something to someone, and every time I was hitting the space bar, I was like unmuting and muting myself as I'm trying to type out a conversation. I will also point out that, like Andy said about using ZoomOSC, I tend to 90% of my days, I'm clicking on the mute button and I'm just keeping it in my eyesight on my screen at all times. But when I do production shows where I'm more about doing comms and I have other things I need to be looking at, for those, I figure out how to run that comms meeting through ZoomOSC, if at all possible, so I can have it down on the Stream Deck. And not only, it's not about the control of my mute button, it's about the feedback from my mute button. I want to know that if I look at that button, I always know, is my mic hot or not? So that's kind of my contribution there.
Go, Jason.
Since day one, I have used only one global shortcut, which is the F19 key on a Mac keyboard, and it works every single time. It has never failed.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, in a roundabout way, I'm doing what Alex does. I've got a 205 Studio Technologies. What's interesting, what you just said, is that I could use the contact closure to, when I push that button, that it goes out to an Arduino or some Scarhoid device and tells OSC to mute and unmute that way. So in a roundabout way, I might be able to get a little feedback, because the downside of doing this way is that my Zoom gallery view always indicates that I'm hot, even though I'm not. And you can see that with Alex, myself, and with Bill down below.
Yeah, the big problem with the Stream Deck specifically, this is probably the biggest problem with the Stream Deck, is the movement, the travel on the keys is too low. So they need to build a pro version that basically triples the travel on the keys, and it would basically reduce all the double. It's basically a double tap because it's not moving enough. I suggest something more like this, just just a big boom, just
15 of those.
I'm ready to just boom, but I think that there's
IBM clicky keys.
But so there has been a couple of us that have talked about tearing apart just as an example, like tearing apart a Stream Deck and putting in real buttons, like what we consider real production buttons. If you go to NAB or IBC, there'll be a booth, one or two booths that are just buttons. And we literally sit there and just push on the buttons going, oh, I really like this one. I don't like the movement on this one. And, it'd be great to have like a really, literally every time I go to IBC or NAB, it's like half an hour of my day is just pushing the buttons and making decisions about which ones move the best, and so it'd be great to have like a high-end version of a Stream Deck. Given that how many people use it, I bet you people would pay twice as much, for the pro version that had real keys. These are just
I don't know.
keys.
I'm up to $1,500 so far with my little Rube Goldberg setup.
Exactly.
F19, Mitch,
Yep.
Come on.
Absolutely. All right, next question.
Next question, Eric Butkus from Chicago. Is there a way to remove the rounded corners in the ZoomISO Windows output?
Go ahead, Andy.
Yes, there is. So grab a 1080p monitor, go to macOS Mission Control, and disable displays have separate spaces. That'll get rid of your top menu bar on that display. Then in ZoomISO, set the output to that monitor, that 1080p monitor, and set the output to full screen instead of 1080p, so full screen. At that point, it's basically projecting onto that display. And then even if you're using NDI, you can stack all of these onto that display. You're rendering to the macOS display layer that is this rectangular output. And then when the ISO feeds are generated from that display, they will have sharp edges. You'll also note that if you want to use the floating window thing, the higher the resolution, the less the incident of curvature is on the outputs in the floating window mode. So like for this show, it's only a couple of pixels because everything's 1080p. When you step down to 360p, it's pretty noticeable. So again, get a display, set the resolution of that display to the resolution of the outputs that you want, turn off displays have separate spaces, and in ZoomISO, say full screen to that display.
Next question.
Samuel Nordvik from Norway. Is there a way to set ZoomOSC as my standard Zoom client on Windows?
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, so deep linking is is the main thing that you would need. Now, I believe that it may be possible with Firefox if you use that as the browser to basically elect ZoomOSC as the thing to open it with. On macOS, I know it's possible. On Windows, Windows handles deep linking in a rather convoluted way. Basically involves you having a registry key and then a global mutex, and then you have to detect if that instance is running and pass it. It's a very technical issue. So the only thing I would say beyond that is consider now that you have the ability to OAuth into ZoomOSC as a potential step in that direction, right? So it might be a little bit of like you're not going to be able to click links that will link you into Zoom, but you still have to copy those out, or you'd have to come up with some intermediate way of bouncing that back to ZoomOSC. Again, these things it is possible, but it's not as elegant. If you're planning to do this, it's much easier on the Mac if you want ZoomOSC as your primary meeting client. I will say that it was never, it was designed with the idea of like a specialized version of the Zoom client that you're intentionally using for a specific purpose. That being said, as we start to make it easier for personal contribution, maybe these are things we need to improve. So something to think about for me.
Next question.
Vic Sinise from Lowell, Indiana. In a webinar, can I edit the font of the panelist? I don't see the option in the manage appearance.
Go ahead, Andy.
So I'm assuming this is referring to the name tag feature in webinar, and you have very limited customization of that name tag. So this is an area where, again, I say that Zoom Apps is a world where I'm starting to see some movement on this type of thing being solved inside of the client, particularly with things like guest mode, which I think is super cool because now people don't have to install these apps ahead of time or log into them. It makes it a lot easier to apply them. So I would keep an eye on Zoom Apps for that. And more customization for name tags. It's sort of like name tags were like the common denominator that was provided so that anybody could turn them on and get something a little more graphical. But there isn't really like a suite for production related things that exist inside of that.
Next question.
Eric Butkus in Chicago. Are there plans for a PC ZoomISO release?
Go ahead, Andy.
So I'd say that, a lot of the functionality of ZoomISO is now starting to crop up inside of Zoom Rooms. Like you can see with the move to 12 NDI outputs from 3, very reminiscent of the way that ZoomISO works. And of course, Zoom Rooms is available on multiple platforms, including the PC. So I think that, some of the appeal of why people have been asking for ZoomISO for PC has been for more of be it an appliance form factor, something that runs in the cloud, right? Things that the Mac isn't necessarily optimized for, in terms of a form factor experience. But I think that a lot of that need is starting to be alleviated by better cloud production workflows, higher endpoint density in the Zoom Room. It's for what you're getting, 12 outputs with isolated audio available through NDI 5, that's not so bad. And that's available, like I say, across platforms. So, I know there are limitations on the control, but now you can control it anywhere in the world with the web controller. So, those do make a difference. And I think that hopefully that brings some relief in that area.
Thanks, Andy. Sam, Jonathan, really, really excited to have you guys join us. So it's really great to have you.
We'll hope to see you at IBC soon with many more things to talk about and enjoy. So.
Yeah, we're going to send a team there. Hopefully, we'll definitely be spending some time with Zoom to talk about some of the new updates at IBC. So we're really excited about that. And again, we're going to start doing, I think that the Friday afternoons, these 3 to 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, are going to become more and more labs. So right now they're just open for us to test them, but you probably will I think these are going to grow into more of a, kind of a lab where we can just kind of play with ideas, trade ideas, talk about those things. So stay tuned for more of that. And definitely, if you're interested in a lot of those, that's going to be a place to play with it. So stand by for that. Thank you to our producers for a lot of the great questions. We got a lot out of the second hour and the first hour, so really well done. Thanks to the panelists, of course. We can't do this without you. And really, really great conversation. And thanks, of course, to the incredible team. We have this huge machine in the background of all these people all over the world doing this every single day. So anyway, thank you so much for your contribution. And now we're going to jump into After Hours.
For those of you interested, Final Cut training at noon today.
Noon. Final Cut training at noon in After Hours.
Thanks, Andy, for the Zoom stuff there.
Hey, that was pretty great.
Thanks, Sam, and thanks.
I'm going to get in so much trouble right now. Watch this.